should you choose to accept it.
It's a quest. It's a quest for fun.
Well, The Rock says, why don't we just cut right to the chase?
Okay, now he wants to get together. Well, he wants to talk.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
It's showtime, folks!
What are you? I'm...
Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome to And I Quote, the live weekly show where we bring in a special guest from any and all corners of the nerd universe, find out a little bit more about them, and find out what projects they have coming up. I am your host, Ryan of Nerd Culture. Thank you so much for being with us. And our guest this week is Hugo Award-winning author, New York Times bestseller, and a gamer fan himself. Mr. Dan Wells is here with us. Dan, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you so much for being with us. And also, if you are watching us live and you have questions for our guest, Dan Wells, please feel free to leave them in the comment section, leave them in the live chat. Our producers are going to be keeping an eye on that as we go throughout the course of the show, and we'll get to those questions just a little bit later on. Now, first things first here, Dan, what were some of your favorite books or writers growing up?
I kind of became a fantasy fan really early on because my dad was, and he read The Hobbit to us when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and have been just a huge fan ever since. Read the Pern books by Anne McCaffrey and Hero and the Crown by Robin McKinley and all those early things. I think maybe one of the very first real books, adult-sized books that I ever read on my own was A Wrinkle in Time. And so science fiction and fantasy has just kind of been part of me since forever.
That is truly, truly amazing. Now, when did you decide to become a writer yourself?
I actually told my parents in second grade that I was going to be an author. And they kind of smiled and nodded and said, okay, what are you going to do until that pays off? And I did end up after college working in the beauty industry for about 8 years. But it has been my goal to write books and tell stories ever since I was little.
Oh man, my goodness, that's amazing that you decided at such a young age. Now, what would you say have been some of the biggest rewards of being a writer?
Oh boy, I mean, aside from being able to tell my own stories and see my books on shelves. I mean, for one thing, I work from home. I am very blessed in that I am able to do this full time. And I know a lot of authors can't. And so it works really well for me. I get to spend a lot of time with my family, with my kids. I have a really flexible schedule. I've also gotten to meet a lot of really wonderful people. Some of the people that I read books from when I was young. I remember when I hit junior high and I started reading all of these, the Star Wars books by people like Mike Stackpole and Kevin J. Anderson. And, now that I work in this industry, I'm really good friends with Kevin J. Anderson. I've got him in my phone and we talk all the time. And being able to meet and talk to and hang out with some of the authors that I read as a kid is really wonderful now.
Well, thank you very much for answering that for us. We do appreciate it. Now, on the flip side of things, what would you say have been some of the biggest challenges of being a writer?
Oh boy. Well, not to get too deep into the weeds of the business side of writing, but it is a very weird industry to work in. Being an author full-time is in some ways much more secure and also far less secure than other jobs that I've had. I don't get paid every other week in a standard kind of paycheck thing. I get paid maybe twice a year, and I just have to budget really well so that I can still have money left by the time the other check shows up. And it can be very difficult to make that work and to plan ahead. But at the same time, like I said, it's a little bit more stable. I know that I'm not just going to get downsized out of nowhere because the company decides to, let go of the creative department or something. And so I don't know, it's just weird. I'm not a business person. I don't like thinking about checks and promotion and all of these things that you really have to think about. I did not realize when I first sold my first novel that I was not only becoming an author, I was becoming a small business owner. And there's a lot of extra kind of boring details that have to be taken care of in order to make that work as a career. And I don't enjoy them, but I'm not going to whine about them too much because I get to do what I love.
Absolutely. 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 Now, do you have any special memories from being at conventions or other types of events, you know, book signings or book conventions and that sort of thing?
You know, I talked before about how I got to meet some of the authors that I loved as a kid. Mm-hmm. The author who made me decide I wanted to be a writer was Fred Saberhagen. And I don't know if you've read any of his books. He wrote a little bit of everything. He's got a huge fantasy series and then a huge science fiction series. He's written horror. He's written all these different things. And when I was first breaking in fact, I don't think I'd even sold anything yet. I did get to meet him at a WorldCon in, I want to say it was Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And just got the chance to shake his hand and say, thank you so much for your books. You're why I wanted to become an author. And that was really, really cool for me. I do a lot of the same things. And I only a few years ago put together that I'm kind of subconsciously trying to emulate Saberhagen's career. I also write horror and science fiction and fantasy. It's typical for a lot of authors to just pick one genre and stick to it. And I bounce around and I do whatever's exciting to me. And so I'm really glad not only that I got to have that example, but that I got to meet him and say thank you to him before he passed away. So that was really great.
Congratulations on meeting the person who influenced you the most in terms of writing and all that good stuff. Are there any particular writers or anyone else you hope to meet once conventions and once Earth reopens after this unfortunate thing known as the pandemic?
You know, at a very several years and years ago, we had a brand new library open in my city. They had, torn down the old one, put in this brand new one, and they had this huge event. And one of the authors that they got for the event was Isabel Allende, who's a Chilean author who writes a lot of great books. One of my all-time favorite books, possibly a top 3 novel for me, is The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. And she was there, and I saw her, but I didn't at the time have the guts to go up and introduce myself and talk to her. And I would love at some point to be able to actually say hi instead of just shyly look at her from afar. So that's kind of a goal for me.
Well, I certainly hope that does come to pass for you, for sure. Because people's schedules, other things get caught up. Sometimes it happens, but hopefully there's always going to be a next time. I hope so. It's going to be difficult because she does not write science fiction and fantasy, and so we are never at the same shows. She doesn't go to Comic-Cons and stuff like that. But some other library event somewhere. Well, I certainly hope it does happen for you. Now, what advice would you have for aspiring writers out there? I have got a lot of advice. I do a podcast of my own called Writing Excuses, first of all, that I do with Mary Robinette Kowal and Howard Taylor and Brandon Sanderson. And the 4 of us do this, and we bring in other guest hosts and everything. It's 15 minutes a week, all writing advice. And so the first thing I always tell people is, anything I can say to you right now, I've already said more intelligently on my show. So everyone go look up Writing Excuses. It's totally free. I'm not trying to sell you anything. So yeah. But then on top of that, if somebody really wants to be an author, they want to break into this, I'd say the first thing to think about is, what is your goal? Because maybe you want to become a published author. Maybe your goal is to be a bestseller, or maybe your goal is just to write books because you think it sounds fun. Both of those are equally valid and valuable, but knowing what your goal is before you start is a really good idea.
once you kind of have your head in and you know what you're aiming at, my advice is just to, sit down and write, because that's the best way to do it. There's classes you can take, there's people you can talk to, there's schmucks like me giving advice online. But more than anything else, just sitting down and doing the work, writing books, is what's going to help you to be able to do it. And then B, at some point, you've got to stop writing. And this we see all the time with, aspiring writers. I was the same way. We have wanted to do this for so long. We've got this incredible idea in our head. And when we're first starting out as, any kind of an artist, your ability to recognize quality is so much higher than your ability to produce it. If you're just getting into writing, you're a brand new level 1 writer, but you might be a level 40 reader. And so you keep looking at the stuff you're producing and thinking, no, this is garbage. I've read good books before. This looks nothing like a good book. Why can't I get this right? And we'll end up just spinning our wheels, endlessly revising something, trying to achieve this level of perfection. Because, the first book I mentioned when you asked me about my inspirations was The Hobbit. That's one of the most respected and beloved books of all time. You are not, on your very first attempt, going to write something as good as The Hobbit. And so you need to stop, and you need to take a step back, and you need to allow yourself to write a bad book, which is painful. We don't want to write a bad book, but you need to recognize that, if you're a painter, for example, your very first painting is not going to sell for $1 million and end up in a museum. Books are the same way. You have to put in a lot of practice. When I started writing, I wrote 5 absolutely terrible books, each slightly better than the last one, until number 6 was the one that was finally good enough for me to sell to a publisher. And so you just have to be prepared to put in that work to write bad books, because each one is going to teach you how to write the next one, and eventually you're going to be really, really good at it.
Did you hear that, friends? Really, really good pieces of advice. Do appreciate that. Now, coming into the present, what are some of your favorite writers now?
Oh, boy. Writers working today, I'm a huge fan of Bernard Cornwell. He writes historical fiction. And I have read not every book he's ever written, because he's written like 100, but I've read a huge chunk of them. I love, looking more at fantasy and science fiction, Sherry Priest is really incredible. One of my favorites of hers, she's got a series that's about Lizzie Borden, the axe murderer, totally recast as a Cthulhu mythos story where she's actually the hero. Really love everything that Sherry Priest puts out. I just finished, or rather not finished, I'm almost finished with some nonfiction by Dave Eggers called The Monk of Mocha. That is about a Yemeni American guy who is trying to start a coffee business and ends up embroiled in civil wars in Yemen and all these other things going on. Big fan of him as an author, Dave Eggers. He does a good job. And I mentioned her already. She's a very good friend of mine, Mary Robinette Kowal. Her Lady Astronaut series is, it's won every award that science fiction has, basically, and deserves them all. She's done a really just incredible job with that. The first one is called The Calculating Stars. It's an alternate history about how Earth has to kickstart its space exploration program several decades early in order to escape from a world-ending catastrophe, because Earth is dying and we need to get to Mars. Really well done. Just beautiful stuff.
Oh my goodness. I'm not sure if this is true or not, but is there a line in the book where it says, "This is the plan. Get your ass to Mars"? Sorry, that's... I'm sorry. That's my movie fan coming out, because as many of us may have grew up on this film. Total Recall, anybody?
Mm-hmm.
Just saying. Just saying.
Fan.
When I think of Mars...
I probably ought to mention Philip K. Dick as well, speaking of Total Recall.
Oh.
His novel, A Scanner
Yes.
Darkly, is my favorite of his books. And, he's got dozens as well. But I have one time in my life attempted to write a book with a slightly Philip K. Dick style. He's very hard to emulate because he's so good. But yeah.
Valid point. Of the many adaptations of his books into film, is there one that sticks out as one of your favorite book to movie adaptations?
I'm absolutely going to say Scanner Darkly again. It was, as much as I love some of the other ones, he's been adapted so many times, and sometimes they're really amazing, like Total Recall, and sometimes you get paycheck. But his movie, A Scanner Darkly, they did it with rotoscoping. So it's kind of animated, but clearly it's, there's Keanu Reeves and Robert Downey Jr. and Woody Harrelson and Winona Ryder and all those people, but in animated versions of themselves. And I just really love what they've done with it. It's my favorite of his books anyway, and so I'm a little biased, but they did a really phenomenal job with the adaptation, and they used that rotoscoping specifically in a way that really leans into the kind of fractured reality and the inability to trust your reality that defines that novel in the first place. So it's not just a weird choice they made. It really works well.
And if memory serves me correctly, I think we may have watched a clip or two of that in one of my film classes that I took at college. Now, I have not seen the film from beginning to end yet, so I can't comment or speculate on that, but I'll add it to my list.
Yeah, I think you'll like it.
I'll definitely, I most certainly should add that to my list. Now, earlier on, I mentioned that you were a gamer. How long have you been a fan or a gamer yourself, and what are some of your favorite video games?
Oh boy, how long? My dad, when we were really little, my brother and I must have been like 7 and 8 years old, and my dad worked with a guy who was a miniature war gamer, and one day brought home from work a magazine that was all about, building your own war game terrain and how to paint things. It wasn't White Dwarf. It wasn't a Games Workshop magazine. It was a historical. But it was the first time that my brother and I had even known something like that existed, and it blew our minds, and we became instantly hooked. And I'm not going to pick up my camera to show you, but this is my office that we're in. And I am surrounded by shelves and shelves of games and miniatures and role-playing games. They're just everywhere. It's been gone past the point of a hobby and well into the point of an obsession and probably an addiction. What are the games that I love today? Oh, that's a difficult one to answer. In part because this big dumb pandemic quarantine we've been under for so long, my weekly board game group fell apart. We aren't able to meet in person, but I've been doing a lot of role-playing games lately because those are really easy to do online. In fact, I am a professional game master that I run games for people online. And so the ones that I am in love with right now, and these change all the time, is Pendragon, King Arthur Pendragon by Greg Stafford. Absolutely beautiful game. Let's see. Dune, which is my favorite novel, just got a brand new release. It's only a couple of weeks old. It might only be 1 week old, but Modiphius just put out a Dune RPG that's gorgeous to look at, and they've done a really good job with the rule set. One of the things that I love about that game is your intentions, your drives, your motivations for what you do are mechanically important. So it's less about what skills you have and more about why you are using the skills in the first place. So for example, if you're trying to sneak past an enemy, if you're doing it in order to get rich, then maybe you're not as good at it. But if you're doing it in order to support, be loyal to your family, then maybe you're much better at it. And your drives and your ambitions, of course, change based on who you are and how you build your character. But that's such an interesting concept to me, and I really love what they've done with it and how that changes the gameplay of it. So that's a big one for me now. Oh, and I also want to mention, sorry, I could talk about my favorite games for the next 3 hours, and I know we don't have that much time, but since you asked, I'm also going to plug a game called Heart, The City Beneath by Grant Howitt and Christopher Taylor. And it's basically like a dungeon crawl exploration kind of game, but with some absolutely beautiful systems built into it, including one called Beats, which is just kind of their character advancement system. You choose every session what your character wants to accomplish, choosing from a list based on the class that you have and things like that. And all of them are bad. So like, if you want to get experience points, you get a pick from a list. Well, am I going to take a bunch of damage? Am I going to betray one of my friends? Am I going to, uncover this hidden horrible secret? And so you pick those, and then you give them to your game master, and she can then take that list and say, oh, well, I know exactly what they want, what kind of experience they want based on these lists. And so then they can craft a story out of it. And so you end up kind of hurting your own character in order to become stronger in this really collaborative way that helps the players and the game master all work together to tell exactly the right story. It's a really, really well done system.
My goodness, am I learning so much in a matter of minutes or what, ladies and gentlemen? But I will ask you this though. You brought up Dune a moment ago. Now, are you looking forward to seeing what Denis Villeneuve, the filmmaker, is going to be doing with his adaptation of Dune as a movie later this year?
I am. Like I said, it's my very favorite novel of all time. And what we've seen out of the trailers and the advanced stuff is just really exciting. Even back when they were announcing the cast list, and they're like, well, we're going to have Jason Momoa in here as, Duncan Idaho, and we're going to have Dave Bautista as the Beast Raban. Every one of those just feels like flawless casting every step of the way. Oscar Isaac as Duke Atreides. And then seeing the trailers, they have done a beautiful job of bringing that to life. I am, to some extent, a Dune apologist. I have loved, unironically, all of the different adaptations that it's gotten. Even the really goofy one with like Sting in it and stuff. I love it. And so I'm in some ways very easy to please. But I'm super excited about the movie coming out later this year.
All right. Look forward to hearing your 2 cents on that movie when it eventually comes out. We're talking about award-winning author Dan Wells. If you have any questions for him, feel free to leave them in the comment section. Live chat, our producers are going to be keeping an eye on that as we go towards as we go into the rest of the show, I should say. Now, to change things around just a little bit here, but before we get to that, when it comes to being a gamer and stuff, how much has that influenced your writing, and how much do you enjoy incorporating video game elements or video game maybe more so type characters into your stories? I noticed you write sci-fi, yes, for adults, but you also write books for, I believe it's middle school aged kids with some of the gamer novels that you have out.
Yeah, I've got my current series, my most recent books are middle grade, which are kind of designed for 9, 10, 11-year-olds. And those are, there's kind of some gamist elements in those, in that it's all about a kid the first one is a kid in a spaceship. So it's all anti-gravity and how he is able to zoom around. And, it at times writing it felt like a platform jumper to me because he was trying to figure out how he could get from place to place in anti-gravity. But I also have one of my young adult series is Cyberpunk that is about esports. And so it takes place in the future, near future. So it's recognizably our world, but more cyberpunky. And then it's about an esports team because I'm a big fan of that as well. I watch, League of Legends and Overwatch are my 2 esports that I follow really closely. And incorporating those kind of overtly into a game. I made up my own game that was heavily based on League of Legends, combined with a couple other games that I love. And wrote them into this book, and it was a lot of fun. It was hard for me, in fact, to dial back all of this imaginary game theory that I had created for this game that doesn't exist, because people reading the book, they want a good story about the characters. They don't want to listen to the author talk about the strategy for a video game that doesn't exist. Yeah, you could definitely see a lot of my gamer nerd stuff bleeding into my fiction.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's no shame in that. There's no shame. It's all good. No problems whatsoever. So to change things up just a little bit, what would be the worst ingredients to fill a burrito with?
Oh, my word. The worst ingredient to fill a burrito with, other than like Legos, do I have to pick food?
I mean,
because if you bite into a tortilla full of like little chunky Legos, that would not be good.
Probably not.
But if I have to pick actual food, what's the last thing that I want to find inside of my burrito? Well, I'll tell you, because arguably the worst thing I've ever eaten in my life was Mexican food in Germany. I used to live in Germany.
Oh.
And
okay.
I lived for 2 years in Mexico as well when I was a lot younger. And so I love Mexican food. And I was very excited after living in Germany for about a year and having access to no Mexican food at all over there. They opened a Mexican restaurant in downtown Stuttgart where I lived. And so I was very excited, and I went down and I ordered a burrito, and it was one of the worst things I've ever had. I strongly suspect that the chef has never actually eaten Mexican food. He's just heard it described by someone who maybe also hadn't eaten it and was just doing his best to make it up. And so it was kind of like cold ground beef and ketchup and just the palest, most flavorless imitations and approximations of what should be in a burrito. So it was solidly in like the uncanny valley of this looks like a burrito, but is so disappointingly not one. That was, I'm going to say that's the worst ingredient to put in a burrito, just not because it was especially gross, but because it was profoundly disappointing.
Oh my word. That must have been a tough day at the office for that person. Must say. So what happened on your worst date?
My worst date? Oh my. In high school, I got really excited one time about the idea of taking a date out to cook food over a campfire. I live in Utah. And so we've got, enormous, gorgeous mountains, like half an hour outside of town. They're right there. And so I was able to convince this girl, and my brother and I, we did a double date. And we convinced these two girls to go up. And first of all, they didn't want to wake up in the morning. I don't know why it was so important for us that this be, let's cook breakfast over a campfire. But we got them up early in the morning. We went up in the mountains. We couldn't get the fire started. They were bored and disinterested the entire time. And I realized when I got home that I had ripped a gigantic, like 8-inch hole in my pants during the process of trying to set this up. And so it was absolutely the worst date that I've been on. The good news is the girl that I had asked out ended up marrying my best friend, and we're still very close, and I see her all the time. She's great.
Oh my goodness, the tables turned. Goodness gracious, that is one heck of a story. How can they say no to a nice setting outdoors like that where the mountain areas are and things like that? That's hard to say no to. For some people, anyway.
For some people. It was very easy for her to say no. But to her credit, she was game to give it a shot, and I whiffed it at every possible opportunity.
There you go. There you go. Another interesting day in the life of Mr. Dan Wells. So, would you rather give up all drinks except for water, or give up eating anything that was cooked in an oven?
Oh, I'll give up non-water drinks easy. It's rare that I drink anything that isn't water anyway. That's an easy one. I will miss horchata. But beyond that, it's rare for me to drink. Like I never drink soda. I don't drink alcohol, so I could give up non-water drinks pretty easy.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. If you could jump into a pool full of something, what would it be?
Oh, a pool full of something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now let's set the parameters here. Is this like, neck deep, like backyard pool that has been filled to the brim with a thing? Or is this just an empty pool that happens to have like a bunch of puppies in it? So I could jump in and play with puppies without damaging them.
You can go with it however you wish.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump in and play with some puppies then.
Ah. Big fan of the little fur babies, huh?
Yeah, I've got 2 dogs.
Hmm.
They're boxers, so they're not little, even though one of them is pretty young. But I love dogs.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm assuming you and your family are big fans of that film called Must Love Dogs with John Cusack and Diane Lane from about 10, 15 years ago? No, I'm kidding.
I've never seen it, actually.
Oh, you've never seen? Okay, well, you're not missing anything because I made the mistake of going to the theaters and seeing it, and I walked out of the theater and I'm thinking, that looked a lot better in the trailers. I'm sorry. That's the thing. These things happen. Sometimes the trailer for the film itself is better than the actual full-length feature film.
Mm-hmm.
That's happened a number of times. I mean, at least with me. I can't speak for everybody in the world, but...
Okay, so your favorite movie trailer?
Favorite movie trailer? Goodness gracious. Favorite movie trailer. Okay, this is where the word divisive comes in, because this film is very divisive amongst audiences all over the world, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Okay.
Well, actually, I'll give you 2 answers. One, the Man of Steel trailer. That's 3 minutes long. Man of Steel trailer from 2013.
Okay.
So there's that one from Zack Snyder. I know Zack Snyder's a whole other matter. Is that the one that
kind of presents the whole thing as if it were an alien invasion movie? So I remember really loving that.
It had the theme by Hans Zimmer. It was the piano, dun 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 dun, and then it has Jarrell saying, "Goodbye, my son. Our hopes and dreams travel with you." It basically tells like a 3-act kind of structure, kind of thing.
Cool.
Kind of story. I mean, if you will. I mean, if you look on YouTube, it's a 3-minute trailer. Just look at Man of Steel trailer number 3, and it'll present itself. But that's one of my favorites. And the other one I really liked was the Force Awakens trailer when Chewie, We're Home comes up with Han Solo and Chewie, because it's like, my goodness, last time we saw you guys, it was in 1983. It's crazy. It's absolutely
cool.
nuts.
Yeah, I got to agree. Those are both strong picks.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, those are probably 2 of my favorite trailers for movies, particularly. I mean, now granted, the full-length feature films, I enjoy those too. I know people, it's very divisive. Man of Steel is very divisive. I get it, but I love it. Force Awakens, again, that's kind of divisive because people say, oh, it's just a rehash of the same movie we saw in 77. Well, I don't care because I like it. So I like the film. Sue me. What are you going to do? So, yeah, jump into a pool full of puppies it was. Yeah, there you go. That's what I was looking for. Gee whiz. So what projects do you have coming up here, Dan, that you can tell us about?
Well, I am right in the middle of an ongoing project that I want everyone to go out and watch. I do a Twitch D&D campaign where I'm the game master, and all the players are other fantasy and science fiction authors. We've got Brian McClellan, Courtney Alameda, and now Marty Murdoch and Ethan Sproat. And they're all great, and it's every Tuesday night on Twitch. So it's called Typecast. Look us up, Typecast RPG. So that's a lot of fun. But what I'm writing right now is I am working on a big collaboration with Brandon Sanderson. He and I have been friends forever, since long before either of us were published. And he's, huge fantasy author. I don't need to tell people who Brandon Sanderson is. He's got a property called The Dark One. And he just, I think it was last year, put out a graphic novel of the story. And we are writing a full novel of that. Full novel makes it sound like I'm diminishing the artistic merit of graphic novel, and that is not my intention. We're putting out a prose novel similar to, but it's going to be slightly different than the story in the graphic novel. And we are also doing a prequel. And the prequel is what I'm in the middle of right now, leading up to the story. The story is kind of fun because it is... it's kind of a really great crossover between my style and Brandon's style, which is why we decided to collaborate on it. It is a kid in our world who finds a portal into a fantasy world, kind of a Narnia-ish idea. And so he goes into the fantasy world and has adventures there. But meanwhile, there is like this evil overlord person who gets pulled into our world and ends up becoming a supernatural serial killer. And so that's the novel is dealing with those two. The prequel that I'm writing right now shows we're doing it as a 6-part mockumentary podcast, similar to something like Serial, one of these murder investigation podcasts that shows someone investigating this weird serial killer and then discovering over time, oh, wait, this is actually supernatural. What's going on? And then we see how the guy gets caught. So then that leads into the novel where he's already in custody. And so it's rather than, a book or a novella, it's going to be 6 full cast audio podcast episodes that we're producing. I should have that finished. I should have the writing finished for that at the end of May. And then I don't know how long it will take to produce. But that's what I'm in the middle of right now.
That sounds awesome-tacular. We look forward to seeing the results of all those projects that are coming your way very soon. Now, Dan Wells, where can everyone find you on social media and everything you have coming up?
So there is another Dan Wells whose name is just Dan Wells, and he got to everything first. He's an actor. He's very web savvy. And so I am the Dan Wells, TheDanWells. That's how you find my website. That's how you find me on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, the Dan Wells. So, and you can look me up on all those and see how rarely I post on social media.
It's all good. It's all good. Sometimes social media is or may not be for everybody, so you never know. But ladies and gentlemen, we want to take this opportunity to thank Dan Wells for being our guest this week on And I Quote. Make sure to check him out on all forms of social media. We have some of those links right down in the description of this video right below. My name is Ryan of Neuroculture. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at It's Neuroculture. New videos are being dropped on our YouTube channel each and every week. So whether you're into movies, TV, anime, Dungeons and Dragons, you can find videos for those on our YouTube channel. Also, if you're wondering, if you had to jump into a pool full of something, what exactly would it be? Or what's the worst kind of ingredients you would want to fill a burrito with? Well, those questions and every episode of And I Quote is powered by pod decks. Pod decks are the next best thing, I should say, in the world of podcasting. Simply buy a set of cards, shuffle them up to gamify your podcast, ask a question, let the content roll. Get yours today at poddecks.com. Make sure you use the promo code Neuroculture to get 10% off your order. You're not going to want to miss it. In the meantime, to everyone out there, please stay strong, stay healthy, stay safe, and read books.